I've done some lectures at music colleges and stuff, and one of the things is everyone can start tracks, but no one can finish them. And I was always guilty of that, and still am to some degree. But there are some little things that I've like been able to like call upon over the years, little arrangement techniques and stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, how you turn an idea from, just a few seconds to an actual sort of 4 minute piece, finished piece of music. So so this selector track started off with this horn sample, which was from my trusty Future Music CD from like 1994. It's important actually that you get your drums in quite quickly after a sample like this. So I would start, I think I started with some very basic drums that I knew would kind of work with that horn line. So, was that clap? Yeah, like this. So I would have started this with just some simple drums and that horn line there. And just check that those drums, you're trying to work the drums round the sample essentially, rather than just starting from drums from scratch. So yeah, the next thing I would do is so I'd start with a sample or some music and then start weaving the drums in pretty quickly after that. But what I would do is generally the start of it would be something like this. Yeah, so you'd have like that section, and you'd just have it going into the drums, instrumental. But what I find useful is to have like a little stab sometimes as well before. So things like that, this, just you're really useful to, I don't know, I just find it like much better than just going straight into the drums. So that stab sort of inspires me to write the bass. So what I do is I'll start off with like maybe the tonic note of the sample. So you've got the, so that's like the main key of it, and I may just try it an octave up and just go straight, something, or maybe like that, like something like this. And then maybe down. And that sort of quickly gets me vibing, and it's like, but without that stab there, or the kind of music going before, I don't think I'd write a bass like that with just the drums on its own, sort of thing. So, and then, that loop, so that's one loop, and then you can take that and repeat that, and maybe do an edit on it and do something like, I don't know, maybe invert it so that goes up there, and maybe you know. So then you get, that makes like a nice. Yeah, and then repeat that, and I'm doing it on a full track here. If it was like we were starting from scratch, I'd obviously be just copying and pasting stuff, but like always kind of doing edits on it. So maybe on this end one, we'll do, I don't know, something different there. Maybe we'll do a pitch bend. Yeah, so there you've got like So quickly, you've got like nice little bass line rolling there, and then I will just keep copying and pasting. Just like I always feel like if you're stuck on a track, just copy and paste what you've got there and do an edit on the next bit. It seems really like cliche and like it's like no, it's still not good, but like it's amazing how your brain reacts when you're listening to say like 50 seconds of music rather than like a 2-bar loop. It just suddenly starts to feel better, because if you think about it, music's not always about the impact of something coming on the drop. It's how it progresses through the thing, and you don't get a chance to do that unless you start arranging it.
Basically, the way I make tunes, and probably everyone does this, or a lot of people do this, is I will get this loop. So I will once I've built this bit, and I've got it to where, I'll put it here actually, because that's once I've built that and I think I've got it nailed, I've got all the drums in the right place, I try and mix as I go to a certain degree. Obviously it's not a final mix, but because I try and mix, this tune on the album is recorded, everything mixed entirely by me, probably why it sounds terrible, but I try and get it into a solid loop where I've got everything, and then what I'll do with the chords and everything all play and make sure everything A-B's right, and I'll bring things in and out with solo and that. I don't use Clips View. I know a lot of people use it, but I learned how to make music on Pro Tools back in like 1998, 99, and then I switched to Ableton 4. When Ableton 4 came out, I think like 98, 99, I can't remember the exact time. And it didn't have if it did have the Clips View, it was very primitive at the time. So I've always just use Ableton in a kind of primitive way. And every time I go in the studio with someone that's, uses Ableton, everyone, you always find out loads of stuff from each other, the little sneaky little tricks and stuff that you didn't know. But the Clips View is just something I've never ever got on board with for whatever reason. I'm sure it's fucking brilliant, but for me, it's just not the way I do it. So what I do is I'll make sure I get this loop solid, everything in there how I want it, and then I'll just literally copy and paste it about 5 minutes, so it's a whole massive block of everything in, and then piece by piece I'll solo, bring stuff in, bring stuff out, and then eventually once I get a kind of idea in my head, I'll go, right, okay, so there's going to be 30 seconds of intro, then 30-second break, then there's going to be a minute of beats and blah 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 blah, then there's going to be 15 seconds of break, and I'll just basically chop out as I see fit, and then mute things until I get it in the right sort of space. So I'll just do it in sections with a tune like this. Sometimes when I was making music with my outboard gear and stuff, it would often be not so to the grid, if you know what I mean. But I also get, because I got ADHD, as you can probably see by my hands going everywhere and my rapid talking, I look like I've done gear basically, but I haven't, I promise you. We can't leave that in. But because I get a bit, I think my ADHD brain and the sort of mathematical way your brain some certain types of ADHD can work, I get a bit sort of fucking flustered if there's like too many weird out of grid things. So I end up generally just getting it back to the grid, just because my brain that's the way it works. That's the way it likes it, and that's the way I sort of make music. So I'll make it into gridded, chop bits out, chop bits, do this, do that, and then eventually I'll have like a rough arrangement, and then I'll sort of, once I've got everything in place, then I'll see what else I can add and if it needs anything. I mean, there's not actually, when you look at it, I mean, if you took, obviously there's a lot of channels in the drum, there's a lot of tracks in the drums, but actually, if you really, if you look at it, there's only really 8 or 9, 10 tracks really.
I'm not a great arranger. Takes me ages to get out of the jam session. What I'll do sometimes is I'll jam in live the drop, so the main drop, and then I'll work around that. I'll build a bridge to the second drop and then create an intro and an outro from there. But it's always jam in the first 2 drops just so I know what I'm presenting, and then spend 4 months trying to do the rest.
Usually I start with some kind of sample that I've heard or found. I like that as a kind of like jumping off point, especially if it's melodic, because melody is something I'm not so strong at. So starting with that is a nice basis to kind of build a tune around, and eventually I'll refine it in the process. Sometimes keeping the original sample, but sometimes not. This one in particular is from the latest record, the B-side, Dark Lavis, which I'm going to show you the sample I used and then how I manipulated it to break it down into like source material to then use in the track. Original sample is from like a Bollywood film soundtrack. So yeah, take that, drag it into Logic, and then I like to use this this sampler, which is Isotope Iris. It's really nice. I find this quite an easy one to get ideas going in. Drag that into there. Put onto Radius RT, which means the original tempo of the sample is kept. This one was pretty easy. It's like an opening intro horn. That's a low pitch. You want to do zoom in to loop it up properly. It looks like it finishes about there. Then once you've looped that up to how you want it, just record it in. Quantize it. Slow it down a little bit. Can extend it a bit. Once I've got that, I'd usually bounce it out into some audio. There we go, so we've got it repitched and sort of the right length that you want, so you can start using that in the track. So that's how I resample something. So that'd be the first part. So that's kind of like going to be the starting point of the track now that I've got that melody. Now for the intro part, I kind of still want to keep that, but I don't want that to be running throughout the whole thing. So you can start doubling it up and like applying different processes to it to kind of manipulate the sound a little bit. A good one for this one was the tremolator in Sound Toys. Yeah, and you can kind of play around with that, get it into different rhythmic patterns. So once you've started manipulating your samples a little bit, you can then start building the track on top of it. So here we've got that sample with the tremolo on. Use that in the intro. A lot more staccato, kind of plucky sound. And then we've got the body of the tune, which is this bit. And then also, I like to kind of put a lot of reverb and kind of turn it into a droney type of thing. You could do that with feeding back reverbs, kind of big infinite spaces, and then bouncing that down in the same way. Just so you've got so there's 3 different sections there that have all come out of the same sample. to kind of structure a tune together. So that's the way I'd go about using that sample. Once you've got that, you want to start putting some drums on top. So I like to layer my kicks up, at least 2 layers to a kick usually. I'd have like the low end part, which is quite a bassy hit for that one. It needs a bit more body in the mid. So you got that, which I've roll off the low frequency so it's not clashing with your bass. And you got these two. And then there's even lower sub bass underneath it. So I've got the first 2 layers rolled off. So the mid rolled off to about 500 hertz. That's the low, sorry. And then you got the mid layered with the sub. That provides all the body really in the kick. So there's no other kind of bass elements. Sits under the horn like that. He's slightly side-chained as well. Just so it's ducking out, adds to the rhythm, a bit more groove. Then you want to start adding, put a snare in. Had that sat on top of the kick drum. Sort of a bit more of like a dancehall drum pattern for that. And then I layer some percussion, so I'd find sometimes like percussive loops in other tracks I might take from, or I might start like building little rhythm sections out of percussion and then bounce them down into one track and then cut them and then maybe resample them or loop them up. So this is just like a little percussion section, sits under there, quite rolling, and then some rhythmic hats and like a little 16th with some rolls. Because the idea basically for this one is you know, this horn sample and then drums, not a great deal else. So you kind of need the drums to kind of stand alone by themselves and still be interesting to listen to. So a couple more layers of those. That's the groove. That was the horn. Bit more of the kind of washed out, reverberated sound, build some tension. Interplay that with the tremolo kind of modulation. Hear that building back in, sort of acts as a fill. So it's just the way that, you know, that one source sample you can then get a lot of material out of if you modulate it correctly, and yeah, it adds a lot more to the track as opposed to if it was just that one original sample with some drums.
What I want to highlight is the importance of not finishing a project and how you can come back to it at a later date with a fresh brain and fresh ears and bring some new life into it. And like myself have got hundreds, if not thousands of tracks that I've started over the years, and I'll kind of go back into them at different points and give new ideas to them over time. And I think it's a really nice way to work because you're always bringing a new part of yourself to it. Like you've experienced things throughout this time, and I think when creating art, you kind of need to bring your life experience into it. And sometimes you can get to a certain point where that track is it's as far as it can go based on where you are in your life, maybe. And then you come to it at a different time with a different perspective, and you can just bring in something new. It's something I've done a lot in my new album, The Lost Boy, where there's some tracks on there where I've made those over the course of the last few years at different times, and they started off in completely different lives and turned out something fresh.
I really like to focus a whole track on one rhythm. I find it really helps just sort of hone my like super complex sound into quite a simple final product. So I guess a good example is like my track Like Water to a Fish from a couple years ago. With that one, I basically used what's called like a 3/2 rumba clave, which is like da 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 da, with a couple of extra notes in the middle, and I just make the whole track, every element in the track uses that same rhythm. The drums are doing it, the synth line is doing it, the bass is doing it, the vocals doing it, and if you sort of focus in really specifically on this one rhythm, I think with a bit of experience of knowing like what works in between it as well, then it's a really useful way of making quite a consolidated final track. Another one is Cascara from my album, which uses like the legendary Afro-Cuban bell line, the Cascara.
Get the track into a form as soon as you can, because I think so many people get left in the loop stage or 16 or 32 bars. So I'd say form it out and don't worry too much about whether the form's interesting or not, because as soon as you've got like, you know, a few minutes set there, like you can start editing it, you know, and you can start, you know, changing it, start developing it from that point. But I think if it stays as 64 bars or something like that, it's very hard to envision what needs to be done. But if you create a 3 or 4 minute track, even if it's really boring at first, you can listen back to it and you'll start going, oh, maybe I should pull the kick out there, maybe I should do that. But you need to kind of create that block of information first for your mind to start coming up with ideas outside the production process. So, you know, you could be listening to it in your car, and if you listen to a 32 bar loop, you're not going to have any ideas. But if you listen to a boring 3 minute thing, you might start thinking about, you know, where shall I change? What things shall I, you know, do to the form?
So what I'll tend to do is do something like this where I kind of just get different melodies and then different, you know, build the song up like that. And then what I'll do is when I'm happy with each part, I'll put down each part individually, doing a pass where I never have an arrangement, but I do my arrangement with my passes, if that makes sense. So each pass I put down, you know, I kind of have 7 minutes of the same jam, and I'll put the pass down in a kind of arrangement in my head. And the reason that is I don't like to like kind of go into editing. So I don't want to kind of like have loads of kind of like passes which I then have got to edit into a song. I like to kind of put the passes down in the structure of the song, and that kind of gets made up in my head. You know, I've got the jam going and it all, you know, all the instruments sound nice off each other, but I want to put a structure down. So each pass I put down, I'm kind of like playing off the last one I did, if that makes sense. And then I'll record those passes down, so they're now into the computer. But then what I'll do is I will then put them through the desk again, through my chain of effects, and put them, you know, and go through the same process again with the stems. Where I put the stems down the effects, so I'm kind of retreating what I've already treated. And this, on Future Wave Memory, I might have done like 4 times on certain songs, trying to kind of degrade it, break it down, and just push it to a point where I'm I'm ready to kind of sign off from that particular sound.